Welcome to Invest in Women, the podcast series, your insight into the growing wealth of women and the issues that impact their business and yours. See what happens when you educate, empower, and invest in women.
Real Fidelity advisors on the support they receive.
The training's great because there's always someone's there to help.
After you have that initial training, then you can always go back and you have different resources. One of the things that I love about Fidelity is how supportive Fidelity is of women specifically.
They talk about the maternity leave benefits, the paternity leave. I mean, just the support you get day to day. It's a great place to work.
Explore a career today at a Fidelity branch. Go to branches.fidelitycareers.com. Fidelity is an equal opportunity employer.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to welcome Alex Roca also to the podcast with Fidelity Investment. She is the new host of Women Talk Money through Fidelity. And Alex, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Oh, Melissa, thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be here.
Well, first, I want to talk about financial services. I mean, that is your bread and butter, and it's traditionally viewed as a male-centric industry, but it has changed over the past 10, 15 years. So at first, the change seemed to be slow, but now it seems to be accelerating. So what is driving that change?
Oh, good question. I also want to almost say, I think we can say the same thing about most industries being male-centric. However, you're not wrong. Financial services has for a long time been male-dominated. But I can say that I have seen that change firsthand, even at Fidelity. I went from being one of a couple to sometimes the only woman on a team to now seeing more and more women occupy different roles within the industry. And I think a couple things are happening. I think for one thing, women are not accepting barriers like we used to. There should be no gender-centric industries. If we think we can do the work, then we can train to do the work and we can do the job. I also think that companies recognize that diversity in who we hire better represents the diverse world that we live in. They are deploying routines and practices that allow for the flexibility that is sometimes needed. For example, things like parental leave or flexible working hours or working environments. Those are being explored, which allow women to explore some of these options that potentially seemed impossible before.
Well, again, it's the changes. It starts out as, oh, that's such a silly thing to ask for. And then it just evolves, hopefully, into now, like you said, we're seeing the importance of diversity and we're seeing the importance of the difference between men and women. So, what are some financial planning needs that are unique to women?
So another great question. I don't know that I would say financial planning is essentially different for women and men. It's more so on how we have the conversation that is maybe a little different. There's also some considerations that may not always apply to men. Like, for example, women tend to live 4 to 5 years longer than men. We need to consider that in our planning. Oftentimes we make less than men, so we need to make sure that we stretch that dollar as far as we can. And oftentimes women are the ones that are taking time off for caregiving duties, whether it's for children or for aging parents. We're the ones that most oftentimes take time off to be able to have those responsibilities. And those things need to be considered when we are making that plan.
And a plan is very important. And then I'm a Gen Xer, and so I'm getting on up there, it seems. And there's different needs that I have as opposed to when I was younger. So talk a little bit about, the difference between an older woman and a younger woman when it comes to financial planning. Absolutely,
we can do that. And isn't that crazy? Gen X and millennials, we just keep getting older. We look fabulous, but we just keep getting older.
That's exactly right.
And so I would say it depends on your age. Your priorities are going to be a little different. Someone who's just starting out in their career may have more questions about funding their retirement plan, what kind of budget they should have, a lot of questions around paying off student loans, especially when you consider that 2/3 of student loans are going to women, right? Those are things that typically are going to be more predominant in a conversation with a younger woman. However, a woman who's maybe reaching retirement or is a little bit older in age, they may have different priorities. They may be thinking about how can they make their money last through retirement? Maybe now they've gotten to retirement. How do they get through retirement? Some questions that we will often see is long-term care. What do I do for myself in those longer years when I'm in my 80s or 90s and maybe I need a little more support? And then the other big one is going to be estate planning. If anything was to happen to me, what do I need to have in place to make sure that my money goes to the people that I love, or maybe the organizations that I want this money to go to? So it's really just a switch in priorities.
Well, and a follow-up to that is I've heard a lot about the great wealth transfer, talking about generations. So how does that play into all this?
Yeah, so let's talk about what that means, right? We're seeing that by 2030, a lot of the wealth that currently exists will be transferring to women, right? And so one of the things that we recognize as a company, as Fidelity, is we don't take it lightly. We want to make sure that when this happens, when this great transfer of wealth happens, that women know exactly what their next step should be at. We recognize that this chapter, this change can come with a lot of challenges. It can come with a lot of unknowns, that all of these things cause a lot of anxiety. And we want to make sure that anybody inheriting wealth is going to know what to expect. And they're also going to know what their best next step is going to look like.
Well, I want to focus on Fidelity and you in particular, Alex. So why don't you discuss your own experience, how it relates to your role at Fidelity? I'm also curious what kind of support and resources have been presented to accelerate your career.
Oh gosh, we can definitely talk about that. So I'll share that I moved from Puerto Rico to the United States 14 years ago, and I started in banking. After about 4.5 years, I moved over to Fidelity and I became a registered representative. So from here, we could choose if we wanted a more service model career or a planning model career. And I really wasn't sure which route I wanted to take. I remember some of the feedback that I received when I shared that I wanted to be a planner. And there's just a natural negative connotation when people think of sales or when they think of planning. And interesting, usually those opinions are shared by people who've never been in the job before. And so I am so thankful for my peers and my mentors throughout my career at Fidelity that helped me make the right decision, because it was the best decision I ever made to become a planner. Right. So working at Fidelity, not only did we have training, but we had mentorships that were appointed so that you could learn from people who were already doing the job. We also had additional training, certifications, licensings, all kinds of supports, resources, and tools to help make us the best planners that we can be. And all of that helped me kind of grow my confidence in being the best planner. And so I would say that that's part of what accelerated my journey. I don't know that I'd be here today if it hadn't been for those resources and those mentors that I had throughout my whole career. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, no, I think that, it's like a garden, right? If you're in the right environment, a plant's going to grow. And I always feel the same way about a human being, right? If you're in the right environment, then you're going to excel, and with the right support. And if you're not, then obviously you're probably going to leave. And so, I mentioned earlier about how you're the new host of Women Talk Money. So let's talk a little bit about that program through Fidelity. Again, Women Talk Money. And what have you learned about, the female financial community through it?
Yeah, so Women Talk Money is a community for real talk and actionable steps about money, investing, careers, and so much more. It's really designed to help your money work as hard as you do. Community members gain access to monthly live events with interactive chat support. So we're there looking at every chat entry that comes in. We also gain access, we also have on-demand replays of the webinars that we host. We also have 2 flagship special event series. We have one in the fall that's just coming up, and we have one during Women's History Month. We talk again about a lot of different things, not just finance, but how to grow your skill set, your confidence. All of these things are covered throughout our events. And then in addition to that, we send a bi-monthly newsletter that's tailored to women's financial journeys. And we also have a curated Learn page dedicated to additional financial content for all the women that are looking to learn more and more. And it's everything women need to feel informed, confident, and connected. And then to your second question, Melissa, which is what is the biggest learning that we've had so far, is that women want to be in the driver's seat of their finances. Women want more education and understanding of what their options are, more actionable steps to take advantage of the opportunities that help them grow their money, and then sometimes more support in figuring out what the next best step is for them.
I know that you have an extensive background in finance and you work for Fidelity. And like we mentioned, you have this wonderful environment that you've been able to thrive in. So doing the podcast, I mean, I know you know a lot going into it, but I'm curious if there's any big takeaways from doing the podcast that you've experienced.
I would say it's a shared takeaway that I had both in my time as a financial advisor. I'm a certified financial planner, so my time customer facing and doing the podcast is the same. And I want to talk about it because I think it's so important. Women often feel like they're late. Right? They're late to the game. They're late to saving. They're late to investing. There is this prevalence in, am I too late? Fill in the blank. And the answer is no. Right? Absolutely not. It is better to start today, wherever you are today, than it is to wait any longer or not to do anything. Right? And so I think that has been one of my biggest takeaways is recognizing that there is this overwhelming feeling of either I'm not doing enough or I started too late. And that's just not the case. Regardless of where you are, there is something, even the smallest thing that you can do that is going to set you up for bigger, better success later down the road.
Yeah, I love that because that is true. As you were speaking, I'm like, yeah, even for myself, even being involved most of my life and my own planning and doing those things, I always feel like, oh, if I had known this back then, or maybe I should have done this. And you're right, you shouldn't second guess yourself. You're right where you're supposed to be. And I know that based, Alex, on what you mentioned earlier about flexibility, with the women in particular, the needs they have because they juggle so many responsibilities, that, maybe being a financial advisor is an attractive career opportunity for women, many people, but especially women. So what are barriers preventing more women from entering this field?
I think it has a lot to do with confidence. There are certain limiting beliefs that keep people from exploring this amazing career as an option. I'm sure you've heard this before, Melissa, where a job posting comes out and women will look through the job posting, and if they don't feel like they match 100% of what is being asked for, they won't apply. Whereas other people may look at that same job description and think, I fulfill 20% of that, I'm going to go for it. Right. And so there is a confidence piece there that is missing, I think, for a lot of women, where we feel like, hey, maybe I have to have a degree in finance or economics, or maybe I have to be an extrovert, or maybe I have to come into this with the built-in knowledge of how to do a financial plan. And that is just not true. And I can do a little myth busting myself, Melissa, using myself as the example. When I joined into this industry, I studied creative communications. I wanted to be a creative art director for an ad agency. So I have no formal finance degree. Myers-Briggs says that I am an introvert, and I had never worked in finance before I started. I was also not an advisor the first week I started, right? So you don't start in financial services and then go right into being an advisor. I had to build up my knowledge base. I had to acquire certifications and licenses along the way. I did all kinds of training that Fidelity put in place that helped me not only build my skill set, but that confidence that we started with. That is what I think a lot of people are missing, and you don't have to come in with it. Most companies are going to help you build that.
We talked earlier about how things have changed. And, as a woman who has spent a decade in the business, what have been the biggest changes that you've seen within your career?
I would say this really ties back to that first question, like what has changed? Why are we seeing more women in the financial services industry? And I think it's because our leaders are asking the right questions, right? So I remember oftentimes being the only woman in the room, and that's no longer the case. And I think it's in part education, right? We're educating more women as to what the realities of a financial advisor role is really like. We're showcasing the flexibility that some of these roles have now that maybe they didn't have a decade ago. We are also making sure, and again, I can only speak to Fidelity, but we're making sure that the women who want to explore careers in financial planning know that if they wanted to expand their families, they are going to be supported through those life decisions, through those big milestones that, again, maybe in the past weren't as important or weren't as looked at as they are today. And so I would say those are some of the things that have changed that make it more and more of an opportunity for women to explore this career.
So Alex, I have a one final question for you. What are some of the biggest changes that you expect to see in the next decade moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, this ties nicely to what our last question, which is I am expecting to see more and more women lean into the opportunity of being financial planners. And we want you here at Fidelity, just saying that. We are seeing that, again, women are leaning into conversations about what jobs they want to have, what careers they want to have. And I think the finance industry is expanding to be able to give these women the flexibility that they're looking for and that they need to be able to explore this as a career option. On the other side, we can see that companies, they're already doing it, and we're going to hope and expect more and more companies to do that as well. Expanding parental leave, creating flexible work schedules, work environments as well, right? Working from home and working from an office. These are things that we're going to continue seeing in the next years. And in that, we are going to see more and more women occupying different roles in the finance service industry.
Well, and I think that's probably in part for the work that you do, Alex Roca, who with Fidelity and host of Women Talk Money, and just through your example, I think a lot of women will be inspired to achieve this or get into the industry. And we thank you so much for being part of the podcast.
Oh my goodness! Again, Melissa, thank you so much for inviting us, and let us know when you want us back.
Thank you for listening to Invest in Women, the podcast series. Your insight into the growing wealth of women and how to attract and retain your female clients and help scale your practice. Learn more by subscribing to this podcast or visiting fa-mag.com.